Hello there, kia ora. Yesterday, MSD released a whole bunch of numbers that show us that, well, the ACT Party would probably say we're celebrating self-reliance, which is ACT Party speak for screwing over poor people, particularly poor people of colour. You see, the numbers that MSD put out there showed that things are not particularly rosy when it comes to our safety net that we've set up to help people in times of hardship. We've got one of the highest numbers of people currently receiving a main benefit that we've seen for a number of years. It's actually up to 11.9% this quarter. We also saw that the number of people or number of main benefits that were being granted has also increased. It's actually the second highest rate that it's been in the last 6 years, the highest being during the first COVID lockdown. We saw a 53% increase in the number of people getting sanctions on their benefits, but we also saw an 83% increase in what they call graduated sanctions, which are, as Craig Rennie says here, the sanctions where they take money away from people for not meeting obligations that WIN's put in place, like doing their stupid work ready courses or, hunting for jobs the way that WIN's wants them to hunt for jobs. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not looking for work, it just means they're not meeting the exact criteria that WIN's has put in place, and there is a huge increase in the number of people who are being sanctioned for that. On top of that, we also saw a massive increase in 2 of the 3 supplementary assistance benefits that WIN's puts out there, accommodation supplements and temporary additional support. But we saw a decrease in the number of people who needed disability support, probably because the government's already shown that they don't want to support people with disabilities by the way that they cut all the funding to Waikaha. Can you see a trend going on here? And the fact of the matter is, this is not a surprise because this is an engineered recession. In fact, the very first thing this government did when it took power was get rid of a mandate that the Reserve Bank had that made sure that they incorporated the unemployment rate when it came to setting interest rates. And a cabinet paper at the time turned around and said that there were a few businesses that were kind of keen on this, but that the impacts were going to disproportionately affect women, Māori, Pacifica peoples, and young people, because they are the ones who tend to be in the jobs that have the most volatility when the economy goes belly up. And when you're engineering a recession and you've got a person in charge of finances for the country who doesn't know what she's doing, well, they're the ones that are going to be impacted the most. But when it comes to benefit sanctions, well, those groups are also the ones that seem to be disproportionately impacted at the same time. You see, ethnicity appears to play a big role in this. Māori, who make up 40% of people on job seeker benefits, made up 55% of those people being sanctioned. Pacifica peoples, who make up 13% of all recipients getting job seeker benefits, they made up 21% of those sanctioned. But Europeans, who make up almost half of the people on some form of job seeker benefit, only received 32% of those sanctions. So these changes disproportionately affect Māori, Pacifica, women and young people in employment, and the way that WINS does things seems to disproportionately affect them in unemployment during the social safety net that we had set up there to help them. And because the government engineered all this, they should be, in theory, trying to basically build a safety net that's going to help people through this so they can get inflation rates down to within the areas that they think is acceptable, which they haven't yet because of other issues that the government's caused, like increases in rates and fuel costs and people's rents and the food costs going up. Yeah. And here's the worst part. Unemployment is set to rise. At the moment, it's expected to get to about 5.2 or 5.1 by the end of this year, and then increase next year. While we keep being told that there is an oversupply of people coming into the country, the last couple of months we've actually seen a net loss of people going out of the country. So that's certainly not what's impacting things at the moment. Yeah, it does seem a bit worrying when you think about it like that. On top of that, the government itself has decided that it really, really needs to step things up to people who are on benefits, knowing full well that it's going to impact whānau who are on low incomes really disproportionately, which means that kids are going to suffer more if they come from a low-income family where sanctions are already in place. And having a family is one of the reasons why some people can't meet those criteria that WINS puts in place to go out and get a job. They could be busy doing parenting stuff, organising kids, trying to deal with school and all the rest of that, while at the same time trying to juggle having half the money that they had to spend, which wasn't very much to begin with, because the government's inputting sanctions because they want to get people off a whole bunch of employment problems. Like, you see what I mean? The whole thing is very, very circular. And just to make things ever so slightly worse, because the government was so determined to make money so that they could do their tax cuts for landlords and the wealthy, They got rid of 300 people at MSD when it came to them doing their job cuts and the budget savings that were out there that they were trying to make so that they could pay for those tax cuts. So yeah, the government's not only engineered a recession, it knows that these changes that they're putting in place disproportionately affect the people that are currently being disproportionately affected. The systems that are in place to try and help people also disproportionately affect those people. And they've made it harder for the organizations that are there to try and help people to actually achieve things. Not only MSD, but we've seen massive cuts in pretty much any other kind of social service out there at the moment. Things like budgeting and food banks are all suffering because of choices that this government has made. So yeah, when I turn around and say that the ACT Party probably sees this as a case of celebrating self-reliance, it really is a case of they've engineered the most cruel system they possibly can to help the people who need it the most.